Hi, I'm Andrew and I teach languages. And in this lesson we're going to look at English pronunciation and steps you can take to be more confident in your spoken English. To begin with, I'd like to explore different varieties of English, as this will help you to select the type of English that you want to work with. So let's start with a little history. In the 17th, 18th centuries, when the early settlers left the British Isles, there were about 6 million English speakers. Later, when the British settled in Australia, there were between 20 and 40 million speakers of English. At the beginning of the 20th century, there were approximately 120 million English speakers, and as we moved into the 21st century, there were an estimated 1,000 to 1,500 million English speakers. So, as the British settlers moved across the globe, they took their language with them. They founded countries where, some 300 years later, English continues to be used as the official language. In 1985, the linguist Brad Kachru introduced the term the inner circle to describe these countries. Now, these countries included the UK, the USA, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, the Caribbean, and South Africa. As a combined total within these countries, there are about 380 million native English speakers. However, English has spread much further than just these countries. English was introduced to and is still used in a wide variety of other countries. The language is officially recognized and used at an administrative level. English was brought to these countries through colonization or trade rather than through migration. Kachru describes these as outer circle countries, and they include India, Malaysia, Pakistan, Singapore, Kenya, Tanzania, and Nigeria. Now, English has a special status in these countries, as many of them chose to keep English as a lingua franca, as a language for internal communication. Now, this may be due to the prevalence of many languages within these countries and multilingual environments, so it's more convenient to use English. Over time, English has taken on facets of these local languages and developed into what we call the new Englishes. They have many lexical, grammatical, and phonetic differences from inner circle varieties of English. However, they're valid, recognized forms of the English language. Then we go inner circle, outer circle, and expanding circle varieties of English. Now, this describes countries where English is not an official language, a first language, or even a second language. The number of speakers of English in the expanding circle is ever growing. People from these countries use English as a communication tool on a daily basis, and there are approximately 750 million speakers of English in these countries, which by far outnumbers the quantity of people in the inner circle. Now, this puts English in a unique situation of having more non-native speakers than native ones. English is obviously used extensively in business, medicine, aviation, science, technology, media, entertainment, and many other fields. Now, this brings us to pronunciation. Most people are taught one of two varieties of English pronunciation: RP, or received pronunciation, also known as British English, and GA, General American. Now, RP, received pronunciation. Received just means accepted or approved. Now, with RP, it's estimated that only 3% of the UK population uses the RP accent. So, given the numbers I mentioned earlier, this represents a minuscule a tiny proportion of all English speakers. So the next question is, why RP? Well, all of the dictionaries which are published in the UK give a phonetic transcription in RP. So if you use the Oxford English Dictionary, the Collins English Dictionary, or the Cambridge English Dictionary, you'll see the transcriptions, which are written using the International Phonetic Alphabet, the IPA, but these are written in RP, received pronunciation. Even technology, such as Siri, Alexa, and Google use RP. In reality, there are almost 40 different dialects in the UK alone. Now, a dialect is how you use the language. There are some lexical and grammatical differences between regional dialects and RP, but also there are many phonetic differences, which in turn leads to numerous different accents being used in the UK. Now, accents are interesting. They can be traced across the country, similar to the lines you would see on a weather map, which are called isobars. Accents are mapped using isoglosses. So you can think of accent change in different areas as a kind of spectrum or continuum. But where does RP fit into this? Well, RP was originally from the East Midlands area of England, and to the south a little, but places such as Oxford and Cambridge. It was a middle class accent. Now this is not necessarily true today. Most middle class people in the UK, in England anyway, have a hint of a regional accent. Also, RP is spoken throughout the UK, particularly in England, and the main feature of RP today is that you cannot geographically place the origin of an RP speaker, nor can you determine their social class. It's a sort of neutral accent, and it is generally spoken by middle class or educated people. But there are many exceptions to that rule. Much like all things English, there are always exceptions. So, when people listen to British politicians, such as David Cameron, Boris Johnson, or even to the Queen, they're not listening to a modern RP accent. They're listening to posh English, which is used by even fewer people than RP. Posh English generally refers to the aristocracy, the upper class, people who went to exclusive schools such as Eton and studied at the University of Oxford. Now, it's a kind of fossilized RP from approximately 100 years ago. Some of the vowel sounds are very different from modern RP, and some of the features of speech, such as word stress, are quite different. Now, RP was originally the accent of the aristocracy or the upper class or the ruling class. So when the first dictionaries were compiled, RP was used and determined to be the correct standard of English. The East Midlands, where the accent originated, was the wealthiest and most educated part of England, some 500 years ago. However, the BBC adopted RP in 1922, as they were of the opinion that regional accents may be less well understood. And the advent of radio helped cement RP as standard British English. Now, the leaders at the BBC at that time may have been like most politicians and indeed the ruling class, Oxford or Cambridge educated, so RP was the natural choice for them. But because language isn't static, it evolves, there are differences between modern RP and traditional RP, which is now posh or upper class English. So the Queen's English is not standard RP. Now RP is perhaps fallen out of fashion too. These days in the media, government, the civil service, you will hear regional accents. Now the irony it is that these days, if you meet a speaker of RP, they were probably educated outside the UK in one of the outer circle or expanding circle countries. and the differences in vowel sounds between RP and posh English. For example, I would say the words married and have in almost RP that I speak. I have some regional accent too, but married would sound like married in posh English. You know, he got married. Words like have would be have in posh English. Yeah, and we also have a thing in English called the intrusive R, which is not used in posh English. Compare here and there. The R rolls into and. Yeah, here and there, here and there. Or law and order, people often say as well. I've seen examples of this. But here and there in RP, or here and there in posh English. So you can hear the difference. Now, in North America, I'm not a specialist in North American English, but linguists hypothesize that there are approximately 30 different accents and dialects in North America. And standard American English, well, it originally evolved from a very similar geographic location to RP in the UK. So I hope that provides some sort of historical context for you, and it should give you some information and help you to decide if you want to develop an inner circle or outer circle accent or extending circle, and if so, which accent you may wish to shadow. Part 2. Now we're going to look at the building blocks of language. These blocks, this masonry, these foundations will give you a solid base upon which to build your usage of your preferred variety of English. So, building blocks. Let's begin with phonemes. So, the Oxford English Dictionary defines a phoneme as any of the perpetually distinct units of sound in a specified language that distinguish one word from another. For example, P, B and D, and T in the English words pad, pat, bad and bat. Now, there are 44 phonemes in English. Now, we write these with 26 characters in the alphabet. Therefore, there are multiple spelling units called graphemes, but this is not a lesson on spelling. Apart from phonemes, we need to be very aware of syllables. Now, the Oxford English Dictionary defines a syllable as a unit of pronunciation having one vowel sound with or without surrounding consonants, forming the whole or part of a word. For example, there are 2 syllables in water, water, and 3 syllables in inferno, inferno. Okay? So syllables are very important in languages. And in phonetics, in linguistics, most languages fall into one of 2 categories. This really helps with intonation, the rhythm of language. There's something a lot of learners of English are either unaware of or find difficult, or they just don't get this explained to them. So, to understand this, we need to look at stress and syllables in relation to the spoken language. So, a stress-timed language is a language where stressed syllables are said at approximately regular intervals, and unstressed syllables shorten to fit this rhythm. Stress-timed languages can be compared with syllable-timed languages, where each syllable takes roughly the same amount of time to produce. For example, English and German are good examples of stress-timed languages, while Spanish and Cantonese are syllable-timed. That's why to, English-speaking ears, Spanish can sound like a taca 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 taca, a machine gun, because it's stress-timed. Quiero hablar español. The stress of the syllables, the time of them, is roughly the same. So learners whose first language is a syllable-timed language often have problems producing the unstressed sounds in a stress-timed language like English, because they tend to give them equal stress. So in syllable-timed languages, the amount of time it takes you to say something is based on the number of syllables used. For example, the timing of each syllable is the same. For example, I want to practice intonation. Maybe a bit emphatic, but it sounds quite robotic to English speakers. In stress-timed languages, the amount of time it takes to say something is dependent on the stress placed on each word. Some words are given more emphasis or stress than others. For example, I want to practice intonation. So I want to practice intonation. I want to practice intonation. You can hear the difference, the opening and the contraction of the sound of some of the words, and we're going to look at this in a moment. Now, the RP pronunciation of English is based on word stress. So often Indian speakers of English who use syllable-timed intonation due to what linguists would call interference from their mother tongue. So in RP, the number of stressed words or stressed syllables used in any phrase will dictate your intonation. So with word stress, people often ask me, well, which words do I stress? Because it's not apparent, it's not easy, it's not obvious. So to answer this, we're going to look at different types of words in English. And I'm not explicitly going to talk about grammatical terms here. We simply need to discuss content words and function words. So content words are the words which deliver the core meaning, the message you wish to convey. These are words like nouns, so park, supermarket, apple. Another type of content word, verbs, play, eat, go. Then there are adjectives like pretty, madly, blue. There are also adverbs, quickly, slowly, occasionally. These are content words. Now, function or functional words, well, they're like the glue that hold the content words together. They're essential when forming grammatically correct sentences. However, if you only used functional words, you could not convey any kind of message. Think of the verb to be, so am, are, is. Also prepositions, in, on, under. We can mention determiners, this and that, articles, a, and, the. These are what I would call the grammatical words, the functional words. As a learner of English, you spend a great deal of time learning these sort of grammatical words and structures. And at some point, everyone struggles to remember, oh, is it I have been, or is it I has been, or something similar. This is why learners of English often place stress on these grammatical words when speaking. They almost have a false sense of importance. When speaking, if you said, I has been, or correctly, I have been, the message is still the same. Furthermore, when speaking, if you reduce the stress on these functional words, the mistake is less obvious and your sentence stress is more correct. So it's a good tip. With the content words, if you said quickly instead of slowly, then your message is completely different. Content words are more important, and luckily this is reflected in our intonation through stress. So let's take a sentence. I'm going to the park. Okay? I'm going to the park. Now I will stress this sentence naturally. I'm going to the park. Did you hear the stress? I'm going to the park. The stress is on the content words, going and park, the verb and the noun. I'm going almost becomes one word. I'm going. Because it's the verb to be. I am. And to the is not stressed. And again, it's almost pronounced as one word. To the park. To the park. So you can hear the stress on the content words, okay? Now, let's take the same sentence and look at the melody. Now, like a song, in the melody, the stressed words are longer. Do, da, da, do, do, da. Yeah? Do, da, da, do, do, da. I'm going to the park. Do, da, da, do, da, da. I'm going to the park. Imagine it's a song. Now, this is great for anyone who's a musician or a singer. So, I'm going to the park. Do, da, da, do, da, da. That's the melody. And also, you can hear the pitch. The ba, 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 ba. The pitch is higher on the stressed words, with the exception of park. The pitch remains lower on park because it helps to understand, helps others to understand indeed, that I finished my sentence. If I put a higher pitch on park, people will expect me to continue talking. I'm going to the park because it's sunny. So I'm going to the park. Da 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 da. So you can hear the stress, the pitch, and how this is affecting my intonation and my pronunciation of this sentence. So generally, when words are stressed, the pitch is slightly higher, except at the end of a sentence. Again, function words, really, well, they're reduced, the vowels are reduced to a schwa. Not the. I'm going to the park. It's more like the. Very short vowel sound. Yeah, I'm going to the park. The schwa. And consonants are reduced or contracted. Not I'm going to the park. More like I'm going to the park. T instead of to. The vowel is eliminated and the consonant is contracted as well. Now, there are other aspects to melody that I will discuss in another lesson. So, hopefully, with some historical content and an understanding of stress and melody, which dictate rhythm, you now have a clearer understanding of English pronunciation and what to look at to improve yours. I'll write more lessons on this content to further help you. So for now, I've been Andrew. Thank you very much. There are some links in the description below. If you'd like to make any suggestions for future content, please leave some comments below. Thank you very much, and goodbye.